We are counting down the top 10 most valuable and historically important Marvel comics of the year 1966. Our rankings are based on the Overstreet Annual Price Guide grades for near mint raw copies. For 1966, the book has to be worth $1,000 or higher to make our top 10. Let's dive in. Number 10 most valuable Marvel book of the year is Thor 126. This is actually a #1 issue, as the title had been called Journey into Mystery, but rather than renumbering it, they just changed the title to Thor, starting with issue 126, making this a key issue for that title headline. In this issue, Thor battles Hercules. In this first issue, we've got Jack Kirby cover and art, white background cover. Tales of Asgard stories continue through this issue up until issue 145. This ranks number 10th most valuable of the year and 257th most valuable Marvel comic of the 60s. On the CGC census, there are now over 1,000 copies graded in all conditions combined, but there are only 12 copies graded 9.6 or higher on the CGC census. Heritage Auctions has sold 184 copies since the year 2000. Using the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, we can see the growth year by year on this book. And it's slow but steady moving in lower grades in the last few years. But you can see in the last decade, the book has basically doubled in lower grades, and it's gone up about 2.5 times in higher grades. It is now a $1,000 book for raw copies. If you want to see how higher graded CGC graded copies are doing, check out eBay sold auctions or gpanalysis.com to see what all the graded copies are doing. Lots of records being broken on CGC copies all the time of all key Silver Age books. On the census, you can see that there are 2 9.8s and 10 9.6s of this book. There are actually 2 of the UK price variants graded, but the average is only a 6.7, no high grade copies at all. Ranking number 9 of the year is Amazing Spider-Man number 40. John Romita Sr. is the artist on this. This is his 2nd issue, in fact. And we have the origin of Green Goblin in this issue. It ranks 9th of the year, 234th of the decade, almost 2,500 copies graded of this key issue, 25 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 323. Nice cover, love the colors. In the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, you can see this book has been generally a fairly slow mover. It's a very highly collected title, but Overstreet stays very conservative on these prices. You can see the book has only gone up a teeny bit in lower grades. In high grade, the book is now at $1,100. On the census, there are 5 9.8s and 20 9.6s. There are a bunch of the UK price variants graded, the highest being a 9.2. Number 8, and this one's very unique. This is the most valuable Marvel reprint issue of the 1960s. It is the 1966 printing of Amazing Spider-Man #1, which you only got if you bought the record album put out by Golden Records. And this is 3 years after the original comic. How can you tell the difference? Well, this reprint has no 12-cent price tag on the cover. So that's the giveaway for this issue. It is, of course, reprinting Spider-Man #1 with Steve Ditko art. It is the 2nd appearance ever of Spider-Man and first appearances of J. Jonah Jameson and the Chameleon. So still lots of demand for this book, which ranks number 8 of the year and 209 of the decade. There are 555 copies graded, 64 9.6s. So a lot of high-grade copies have been saved in this book. Heritage has sold 49 of these. In the Overstreet Price Guide, you can see slow but steady growth in all grades. Now a $1,200 book. There are 18 9.8s and incredibly 46 9.6s. So somebody in 1966 hoarded this comic, and maybe at that time was even selling it as an original copy because people wouldn't have known the difference in those early years of collecting. Number 7 is Fantastic Four number 46. This issue featuring Black Bolt as the leader of the Inhumans. He makes his first full appearance. This cover art by Jack Kirby. There is a Twin Cities Pedigree Collection copy graded 9.8 by CGC. Ranked 7th of the year and 194th of the decade. Lots of demand for this book. Really jumped up on the census in recent years. Over 2,000 copies graded, 34 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 248 copies of this red and white background cover. Overstreet Price Guide with news of movie and TV news for these characters. Prices skyrocketed in 2015. The book more than doubled in a single year at that time. And now it's back to slowing down again. It's been stalled in lower grades for a few years, but still moving up in high grades. So in lower grades in the past decade, the book has tripled. And in high grades, the book has almost quadrupled. On the census, there are 9 9.8s and 25 9.6s. Number 6 is Amazing Spider-Man number 39. This is the first issue featuring the artwork of John Romita Sr. And he's considered one of the classic, iconic Spider-Man artists. Green Goblin's identity is revealed as Norman Osborn in this issue. Number 6 of the year, 152 of the decade, 2,400 copies graded by CGC, but only 40 of them ranking 9.6 or higher. Heritage sold 332 copies. Overstreet Price Guide had a nice bump just in the last year. Demand definitely growing for this issue. And you can see in the last decade, the book has not quite doubled in lower grades, and it has just about doubled in higher grades. Now a $1,500 book. On the census, there are 9 9.8s and 31 9.6s. Next on our ranking, number 5 is Amazing Spider-Man number 41. This is the first appearance of the Rhino, a classic iconic cover, white background, art by John Romita Sr. on the cover. And this ranks 5th of the year, 136 of the decade, 2,600 copies graded, 23 high-grade copies, 274 sold by Heritage. Now, demand is really strong for this book in recent years, and you can see in all grades, this book is really moving quickly. And this is turning out to be one of the biggest Spider-Man keys, which has really been undervalued. So good growth. So in the last decade, the book has definitely more than doubled in all grades. Now $1,700. There are only 3 9.8s, but 20 9.6s of this key book. Number 4 of the year, we're getting into some iconic covers here. Fantastic Four, number 50. The Silver Surfer battles Galactus in the 3rd appearance of both characters. Brown background cover makes this to be actually the hardest of the Silver Surfer trilogy issues to be found in super high grade. Ranks 4th of the year, 73rd of the decade. Almost 2,700 copies graded by CGC, only 11 9.6s or higher. Heritage sold 332. In the Overstreet Price Guide, this book has really taken off in the last 2 years. It's skyrocketing. It's doubled in only 2 years. But if you look at prior years, you can see this book actually was so common in lower grades that it was stalled for a decade. But now it's really taking off. So if you bought it a decade ago, you've 2.5 times your money. And in high grades, you have tripled your money. Now a $3,000 book. This is really taking off. Everybody wants this book. There are 3 9.8s and 8 9.6s. Ranking 3rd of the year is the 2nd book in the Silver Surfer trilogy, Fantastic Four, number 49. This is the first cover appearance of Galactus, and it's the part 2 of the 3-part storyline from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, ranked 61st, most valuable of the decade. Demand skyrocketing for this one, almost 4,000 copies graded, but only 15 super high grade copies. Heritage has sold 411. This has a black background cover. Again, really skyrocketing. In the last 2 years alone, this book has more than doubled in all grades. And in the last decade alone, you can see the book has gone up 3.5 times in low grades, and it's gone up 4.5 times in high grades. This is now a $4,000 book, really jumping now. There is only 1 9.8 in existence, 14 9.6s. Ranking number 2, one of the most iconic covers of Marvel Comics' entire history. The first appearance of Silver Surfer and Galactus. The classic cover. red background cover. Number 2 of the year and number 40th most valuable of the decade. We've got Jack Kirby classic cover art here. Over 6,500 copies graded. There is amazingly 138 super high grade copies of this book. Heritage has sold 675 copies. Demand is sky high for this book. And again, in Overstreet really taking off in recent years. In the last decade alone, you can see that you will have almost quadrupled your money for lowest grades and quadrupled your money even in high grades. Now a $6,000 book, making huge gains in the past year. There are 39 9.8s, 99 9.6s, and unbelievably 126 9.4s of this book. Super high demand, but the only reason it's not more expensive is because there's so many copies saved of this book. And that brings us to the number 1 most valuable and iconic Marvel comic of 1966. It wasn't always ranking number 1, but in the last decade, this is the book to have. Fantastic Four, number 52, with the first appearance of the Black Panther. And this is the first major Black superhero in the Marvel universe. And it's got the dark black background cover as well, making this a tough one to find in high grade. We've got Jack Kirby cover art. Once the movie came out in 2018, prices were skyrocketing with speculators and investors. It ranks number 1 of the year, 25th of the decade. This is a major book. Almost 5,000 copies graded, 29.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 413 copies. Using the Overstreet price guide, again, demand just skyrocketing every year on this book. If you bought this book a decade ago, it has gone up 10 times its price in lowest grades. That's quite unbelievable, but it's even gone up about 13 times in higher grades. Now this is a $9,000 book. On the Census, there were 5 9.8s and 15 9.6s. Now let's compare the top 10 books of the year on the CGC Census, compare how many are graded and which ones are rarer in the highest grades, and look for some trends happening here. Well, by far, Fantastic Four 48 has the most copies graded with 6,500 copies. Now, is that due to being the most in-demand book, or is it just actually the easiest book to find? That's always the question with these census stats. After that, we've got Fantastic Four 52 with 4,800. And after that, Fantastic Four 49 with 3,900. Way at the bottom of the list, though, the Spider-Man Golden Record reprint is actually quite low at 555. And Thor 126 only at 1,000 copies. On the Census, you can see all of these books have 9.8s, but the rarest is Fantastic Four 49 that only has 1 copy, and Thor 126 only has 2 copies. By far, the most common book on the Census is the Fantastic Four 48. There's just so many high-grade copies. Overall, looking at the Census, it looks like the rarest book in the 9.0 and higher might be possibly the Thor 126 or maybe Fantastic Four 50. So there you go. All right, the top 10 Marvel comics of 1966. This series continues every week, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.